Alright everyone, I am still on vacation, but as promised, doing like a couple videos and later probably a Manafort video. So we'll start with Ebola deaths within the Congo. Because the situation has gotten worse. The Ebola epidemic there started some time ago, and it's like, there's been a few Ebola cases, and at first not that great a concern, but then the problem is it's taking place in a war zone. That is, there's an ethnic conflict within the province, a very large area within Congo. It's, not necessarily a very well-developed area. In an area like that, you've got fighting going on, you've got poor infrastructure. It's arguably worse than the situation you had in West Africa back in 2015, I believe it was, with the last big Ebola epidemic. The last time Congo had an epidemic, it happened in an area that was relatively calm. So, Medicine Sans Frontières comes in, Doctors Without Borders, and all these groups, and they were able to snuff it out. I think it only had about 100 deaths, which is relatively small compared to what it could have been, because there may have been upwards of 10 to 20,000 dead in the Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone outbreak years ago. And they were happening at the same time. Some people were worried that Congo had been infected with the same strain. The problem is that even under normal circumstances, Ebola is not actually that able to infect person to person very easily. When you get an outbreak, it's usually someone ate bushmeat. They ate either bat or chimpanzee, usually, meat, or something like that, something that's able to carry Ebola. There's thinking that some birds may be kind of technically capable. They rumored the same about rabies for years, which is terrifying. It's like, don't eat that chicken, I guess. What happens is usually in some village, somebody eats the bushmeat, they get Ebola. Because they're in intimate contact with other people, by the time that anyone realizes that, the Ebola is here, you got 50, 100 people dead. The whole village gets wiped out. But because there's not too much trade and travel, it usually snuffs itself out. But here we have a war zone. What happens in war zones? Infrastructure breaks down, people are fleeing, sometimes rapidly, someone is infected but they're not yet showing symptoms, they might travel 10, 20 miles, infecting a whole different village. You can get a situation where the people who are engaged in conflict, you've got relative lack of medicine, people are malnourished potentially, they're going to be more susceptible. And really they may come into contact with people. How do you know that the person's got Ebola versus is just wounded until you get up close to them? Could be a little bit of a problem. And we saw this with the outbreak of exotic diseases with ISIS. So now you've got 49 people dead as of yesterday, and it's probably higher. They're talking about having to trace upwards of 2,000 contacts in an active war zone where travel is difficult enough as is. There are other problems. If you're in the Congolese basin, there are other problems too. There are wild animals out there that are quite deadly. From, I think army ants are native to Central Africa. I can't remember that or Brazil. Is it the Amazon or the Congolese rainforest that has army ants? I don't know. You've got literally everything under the sun. Some gorilla comes down literally out of the hills and, punches you in the neck, drags you off or something just because it doesn't like the way you smell. This sort of stuff can happen, and then people still consume the bushmeat. So this is why you get continuous Ebola outbreaks anyway. The last time in West Africa, the reason why it spread so far was, number one, it was a mutated variety, and number two, the funerary sort of situation. People in those cultures very hands-on, washing the dead body, sort of being around the dead body for an extended period before burying it. What Doctors Without Borders and these groups did was cremate the dead. So a lot of people didn't even go in to seek treatment because they're like, hey, I'm going to die probably anyway. I at least want to have a grave. And the concept of contagion wasn't fully known, I think, to all of these people because they don't have a medical education in some outland village where there is no school. Probably not happening. Unfortunately, this is one of the less developed parts of the Congo, so you've got basically the same problem. You have a rapidly inclining population density in Central Africa. You have little infrastructure, you have a war zone going on, and the possibility that this could be one of those mutant strains. The regular Ebola strain is not very infectious, ultimately person to person, unless you're coming into significant intimate contact. Unfortunately, when it mutates, there's a chance that's no longer the case. We're just lucky that it didn't go fully airborne the last time. because of the number of people that were being infected, it mutated at least twice during the whole situation. First, to become more infectious. Second, releasing a second variant that was asymptomatic. And literally, the person's got Ebola, they don't have symptoms, they're feasibly capable, through sex especially, of transferring it. It became an STD. Ebola functions now, in some cases, as a sexually transmitted disease. Potentially a problem. So what happens if during this outbreak it mutates and does one of those things again? Again, in a war zone, you might have a mass rape go on at any given time over ethnicity, and then of course, you could have 100 people get this disease. Even if it's asymptomatic, it can mutate further. Mutation is really the ultimate enemy, not the disease itself. Its ability to change each time it replicates can be a problem, and so you have these weird mutants. Influenza is more dangerous overall to humankind than Ebola. It's more likely to be able to go full pandemic mode, but we've seen Ebola is capable of decimating an entire region. It's capable of killing the population of a small city fairly easily. It did so in the few months the last time it broke out. We're lucky almost that the asymptomatic version was probably protecting people from the symptomatic one. But it'll be difficult, I think, for them to put, sort of contain it. It's going to be difficult because people in a war zone, if you have Doctors Without Borders show up, there's no guarantee that their little field office doesn't get attacked by militants and taken over, the doctors get killed. A lot of people won't be willing to volunteer to go into a war zone unless they've got a significant presence of troops to guard them. Well, those troops don't really want to be, on call either. They're like, oh, I'm sitting this one out. Ebola's around, bullets are flying around, and then that fucking elephant over there looks pissed. It could be a difficult issue. So I would say, unfortunately, I think that we've just seen the tip of the iceberg of the number of people that are likely to die, especially if they're right about 2,000 contacts having possibly been made by those already infected or dead. That's a lot of people to account for in a very short period of time before it potentially spirals out of control. Just think if only 20 or 30 people get infected. They in turn then can infect 20 or 30 more people apiece under the right circumstances. All you need is one situation where one person with Ebola doesn't get traced before they flee into a refugee zone, and then they come into very, very dense quarters with potentially thousands of people, and pretty soon you have hundreds of people keeling over left and right. The refugee zone depopulates, they scatter around. Again, people are fleeing because of the war itself. It's a perfect scenario for a major epidemic. That's about all. Peace out.